The Tenant's Last Stand. The sun beat down on the dusty streets of Redemption, a town clinging to existence in the harsh embrace of the New Mexico desert. The Tenant, a solitary figure cloaked in the shadows of his past, rode into town on a stolen horse. He'd left a trail of blood and broken dreams in his wake, the spoils of a bank robbery weighing heavy in his saddlebags. Seeking refuge from the pursuing lawmen, he sought shelter at the Widow's Nest, a boarding house run by the stoic, yet kind-hearted, Eliza Blackwood. Eliza, a woman weathered by loss, saw a flicker of vulnerability in the Tenant's cold, calculating eyes. She offered him a room, a temporary sanctuary from the storm brewing within and without. Unbeknownst to the Tenant, another boarder, the sharp-eyed and suspicious Silas McCready, had observed his arrival. Silas, a former bounty hunter with a nose for trouble, sensed the taint of criminality clinging to the newcomer. As the Tenant settled into his room, the weight of his sins bore down on him. The blood-stained money felt like a curse, a constant reminder of the lives he'd shattered. His mind was a battlefield, torn between the thrill of the outlaw life and the gnawing guilt that threatened to consume him. Each creak of the floorboards, every distant shout from the saloon, sent a shiver of paranoia down his spine. He knew his respite was temporary, the law was closing in, and redemption was anything but. Silas, driven by a relentless thirst for justice, began to investigate the Tenant. He pieced together clues like a bloodhound on a scent, his suspicion solidifying with each passing day. He noticed the Tenant's aversion to sunlight, the way he flinched at sudden noises, the subtle shift in his demeanor when the topic of the recent bank robbery arose. Silas was patient, a predator waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Meanwhile, Eliza found herself drawn to the Tenant's quiet desperation. She saw a man trapped in a cycle of violence, yearning for redemption but unable to break free. In the evenings, she would bring him a cup of tea, engaging him in conversation, trying to pierce the armor he had built around his heart. The Tenant, surprised by her kindness, found himself opening up, sharing fragments of his troubled past. Eliza listened without judgment, offering a glimmer of hope in his bleak existence. One sweltering afternoon, as the desert wind whipped through the town like a vengeful spirit, Silas decided to act. He cornered the Tenant in the dimly lit hallway of the boarding house. "I know who you are," Silas hissed, his voice raspy from years of chasing outlaws. "You're the one they call the Tenant, the bank robber who left a trail of bodies in his wake." The Tenant's heart hammered in his chest, his breath coming in ragged gasps. His hand instinctively reached for the Colt revolver tucked into his waistband. "You're mistaken," he croaked, his voice betraying his fear. Silas smirked, his eyes glinting with a dangerous light. "Am I? I don't think so. I've seen your kind before. You're a wolf in sheep's clothing, a killer hiding in plain sight." The standoff escalated, the air crackling with tension. The other boarders, sensing the impending violence, huddled in their rooms, their faces pale with fear. Eliza, drawn by the commotion, emerged from her quarters, her eyes wide with alarm. "Please," she pleaded, her voice trembling. "There's no need for bloodshed. Can't we resolve this peacefully?" Her words fell on deaf ears. The Tenant, backed into a corner, saw only one way out. He drew his gun, his finger tightening on the trigger. Silas, anticipating the move, reacted with lightning speed, his own weapon barking fire. The Widow's Nest erupted into chaos. Gunshots echoed through the hallways, shattering the fragile peace that had once reigned within its walls. The Tenant and Silas engaged in a deadly dance, their bullets tearing through the air, splintering wood and shattering glass. Eliza, caught in the crossfire, screamed in terror, her pleas for reason drowned out by the deafening roar of gunfire. The Tenant, fueled by adrenaline and desperation, fought with a ferocity that surprised even himself. He moved with the grace of a panther, dodging bullets and returning fire with deadly accuracy. Silas, a seasoned veteran of countless gunfights, was equally relentless, his every move calculated and precise. The battle raged on, the boarding house becoming a macabre stage for a duel between two men consumed by their own demons. The air was thick with the acrid smell of gunpowder, the floorboard stained crimson with the blood of the fallen. Finally, in a moment of heart-stopping silence, the gunfire ceased. The Tenant stood panting, his gun still smoking in his hand. Silas lay sprawled on the floor, a dark stain spreading across his chest. The tenant had won, but at a terrible cost. Eliza, her face streaked with tears, rushed to Silas's side. She cradled his head in her lap, whispering words of comfort as his life ebbed away. Silas, his eyes filled with regret, reached out a trembling hand, grasping Eliza's. "I'm sorry," he rasped, his voice barely audible. "I just wanted..." His words trailed off, his hand falling limp. Eliza closed his eyes, a sob escaping her lips. She looked up at the tenant, her gaze filled with a mixture of sadness and anger. "Why?" she asked, her voice choked with emotion. "Why all this violence? Was it worth it?" The tenant, his face etched with exhaustion and remorse, lowered his gun. "I don't know," he said, his voice hollow. "I guess I just got caught up in it all. The thrill of the chase, the rush of adrenaline. It's all I've ever known." Eliza shook her head, her tears flowing freely. "But at what cost? Look at the destruction you've caused. Look at the lives you've taken." The tenant's shoulders slumped, the weight of his actions crushing him. He looked around at the blood,